This is the Voices of Florida House District 14, Love Thy Neighborhood podcast. I'm Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, your 2026 candidate for Florida State House District 14. From kitchen tables to corner stores, City Hall to the state capitol, this podcast is about your voice, your story, your future. Join us as we build people power and organize for real change. Follow us on our website at voteteresaforflorida.com. Paid for by Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, Democrat for Florida State House District 14. Dr. Melissa Haussman grew up in Massachusetts and did her schooling in Maine, Canada, and received her PhD in political science from Duke University in 1994. Dr. Melissa has taught for 35 plus years in various states and in Canada, recently retiring from Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada, where she spent 17 years. Melissa is a keen participant in politics from high school onward, where Melissa was an elected local official in Massachusetts, worked in the Massachusetts Legislature, and she has helped many progressive campaigns in both the United States and Canada. She is the author, co-author, and co-editor of 8 books on the United States and comparative politics, with a 9th book in the works. Welcome, Dr. Melissa Haussman. Greetings and welcome, everyone. This is Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, your 2026 candidate for Florida House District 14. We are featuring Voices of Florida House District 14 podcast, and we are with the amazing Dr. Melissa Haussman, Carleton University Political Science. She is a multifaceted author, but I met her when I was running for office in 2024 for Florida House District 14. She was a breath of fresh air, open arms, so loving, so supportive. I mean, just really pushed me beyond my measures that I thought could be pushed in the political space. But I so love her so much, and I appreciate her humble spirit. Thank you so much, Dr. Melissa, for doing this interview, and welcome to the Voices of Florida House District 14 podcast.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Teresa. Happy to be here.
Thank you, thank you. I understand. I mean, today our topic, we're going to talk about advocacy, academia, and activism across borders. So let's talk about borders. That's interesting. Because when I met you, I didn't know you was also a resident in Canada till I started reading your professorship background. So who is Dr. Melissa Haussman? Let's learn about you first.
Wow. Okay. So I grew up in Massachusetts, in suburban Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a high school in the 1970s, which was in the crosshairs of desegregation. The judge who ordered desegregation in Boston, his daughters went to my high school, and it was an incredible eye-opener for those of us suburban privileged white kids. We saw this car parade, I guess you'd call it, of disgruntled folks from inner city Boston, white people who were against the busing of, students to each other's high schools. And so watching that I think I was a junior, that really opened my eyes to how inequality surrounds all of us all the time.
That is so seeing and watching that in real time. I'm quite sure you had questions for your parents, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
What
and
was
I never
that
got good answers. Sorry.
That's what I'm going to say. What was that conversation like?
Yeah, well, they were both, I wouldn't say they were hugely conservative, but, compared to me, they were way more conservative. I didn't become a member of the Democratic Party officially until I started going to grad school in North Carolina in the 80s, and saw that, the Democratic Party was really the party of change and the party of promoting civil and human rights for folks. So that was a long time transition coming, although frankly, after the 1980 campaign and change in the Republican Party platform, in which the historic commitment of the Republican Party to the Equal Rights Amendment was basically removed from the platform, as well as, the pro-choice planks. I said, that's it. I've had enough. And so, there was a transition there from 1980 onward, and it became final in 1986.
Wow, that's amazing, Dr. Melissa. Now I understand you grew up in Massachusetts, you did your schooling in Maine. Where does Canada come in
Ha!
at?
So I spent a semester of my junior year at McGill in Montreal. There was a Canadian exchange program, and that was when the first separatist referendum was being held by the province of Quebec. And as a political scientist, a young political scientist, I just got fascinated by that concept that people could vote to leave a country,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So after I graduated from my undergrad at Colby, I went to do my master's at Carleton. And then in between that, I worked for a couple years, first at the Harvard Center for International Affairs, and then in the Mass Legislature, and then decided to take the plunge into the PhD program at Duke.
Wow.
But that's where that comes from, basically doing a semester at a very opportune time when Canada was wrestling with, whether Quebec was going to leave or not.
That is amazing to hear your experience with learning what was happening in Canada versus what we was dealing with in our country. So, how did you land here in Jacksonville, Florida, or in Florida in general, so to speak? How did you get here?
My wife's sister has lived here since the 1970s. And so we would come back and forth for winter trips, both when we lived in Massachusetts and then when we lived in Canada for 17 years. And then we decided as my wife got closer to retirement, and I did too, to move here. So
Okay.
that's what we did in December of 2022. It would not have been basically something I would have thought of sort of in the abstract, but here we are and happy to be here and part of the resistance, frankly.
I know that's right. That is most definitely the truth. So when I met you at the Duval Election Committee, the Duval Dems monthly meetings, you were very actively involved. I didn't realize how many roles you had until I saw you in action. I tell anyone, you cannot judge a book by its cover with these folks that's in political advocacy. I'm telling you, I thought I wore a lot of hats. I think y'all have outdone me. But how did you get involved with the local DNC here?
Yeah, so it's funny. I knew some folks who were friends of friends from Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we moved here, we got together with Kelly McBride. This is the specific person has been the treasurer, or sorry, the secretary of DWIN. And she said, "Oh yeah, there's this women's organization that's a part of the Duval Dems." So
Mm-hmm.
I joined DWIN, and then they had this really interesting mentorship program, and Philip Miner took me on as his mentee. And of course, that guy knows more about Florida politics than, 10 of us put together.
Yes,
And so
ma'am.
he's been very, helpful, as have other people. I mean, as the more you do, the more doors open to you. And of course, some of us are better at saying no than others. So that's the bottom line.
That is most definitely the truth. Be
Yeah.
honest, Philip Minor, he was very influential for me. I think
Yeah.
I met him when it was around the time we was dealing with the redistricting here in Duval County, and it was real massive, especially in the urban core historic districts. And I interviewed him on my other podcast, Courageous Conversations,
Ah,
which to this day is still getting a lot of hits and likes and downloads because he really broke down what the redistricting meant and how it really impacts, the the minority vote. And he was the person I reached out to just ask one question. What would it take to run for office? That's all I asked them. And little did I know,
Did you get an
72
hour-long answer?
look, 72 hours I was in I was running in the race. So yeah, Philip Minor is very instrumental, but I love the fact how you attended, my Love Thy Neighbor community conversations, which I am super excited of ramping back up in June and July this summer. But for me, you, Dr. Melissa, academia and activism, how do you um operate in those roles, either in tandem or separately, or how do you navigate that space?
Well, I think, frankly, to do academia and particularly teaching, but also scholarship right, one
Mm-hmm.
has to be an activist and to ask oneself what's wrong with the status quo and what can I do to fix it. And so there are always going to be students, and I've taught all levels in college from intro level through PhD students. Um, and to deal with students who have different histories and different abilities, as well as, frankly, different political opinions, that can be a bit of a challenge.
Yes.
Um, but to recognize that a big part of my job was to empower students and to help them gain the confidence to succeed. And some of them were, of course, better at researching than others. Some of them were better at writing than others. And so it takes a lot of time. I mean, one doesn't just go in there and sort of teach for a couple hours and then walk away. It's a much bigger and longer commitment in terms of saying, okay, this is where you missed a few points in this paper. How can we fix this? Gee, I think you should read these authors because they have a lot to say about this. And of course, I learned from students as well. Um, and I think, the activism interest and academia have really always been there for me. And I mean, that does go back to high school. So I took a course. We had this accelerated course that was taught by a professor at Wellesley College. And it was there was a big local issue at the time about nutrient runoff in a swimming pond that was very popular in the town.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was fascinating. And so we learned about, how choices that people make in terms of their laundry detergent, their lawn fertilizers, how that affects public swimming holes and stuff like that. And we still know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in college, one of my political science professors ran for Congress. I mean, he got hammered, but, it was an interesting introduction because we were out getting people to sign his petition to get on the ballot.
Right.
Um, in Then, of course, the interest in Quebec separatism fueled my graduate work. And when I was in North Carolina, there were a lot of really great progressive organizations. And one of the ones I worked with a lot was North Carolinians Against Racist and Religious Violence, called NCARV, headed by a phenomenal woman named Mandy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And they were often doing anti-Klan work because, of course, they were still around in the 80s, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's all of a piece. I really don't see how one could be an academic without being activist. And of course, being in academia and being a published author has informed my activist work because, I mean, along the lines of what we were talking about previously, the
Mm-hmm.
issues of voter discrimination. I mean, I've taught a course on voter suppression, and I learned so much about the extreme powers that state legislatures and governors have to shape the districts. You were talking about districting in which
Yes.
people run. Um, and this actually just came up in the Canadian election that happened last Monday, in
Mm-hmm.
which, while the Liberals retained office, they didn't get the majority they hoped for because, like the US, every 10 years, Canada redistricts. Well, the redistricting had a big impact on the competitiveness of certain parties. And so for the first time in many, many years, the two major parties in Canada each have a huge portion of the votes, and a lot of the third and minor parties lost vote share and seats in the federal House. So the issue of how well people are represented and all that sort of stuff, it can be strongly affected by whoever gets the power to redistrict. I mean, that's to me, that's something we can never forget, and we have to keep it, front and center.
That is good to hear and interesting, especially here in Canada dealing with redistricting.
Yes.
So you've been in the political space a little bit longer than I have here locally in Jacksonville. What is the historical for, let's say particularly Florida House District 14? Because I think you were around when Angie Nixon ran against the current incumbent that I'm running against now. What was your experience and what have you learned from her serving in that role? We're talking about Representative Dane.
Oh, well, I actually moved here just after that election, but I mean, Angie Nixon is such a beacon of hope and to be commended. And one has to be honest and clear about who one is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as you know, in your former campaign, claiming that one is a Democrat without upholding the values of the party is really problematic. It just
Very.
doesn't quite work. And it's
And
yeah.
go ahead, Dr. Melissa, finish
No,
your
I was
statement.
just going to say at some point, the voters will figure it out. It may not be as quickly as we would hope, but at some point, the voters are going to figure it out.
Right, and I totally agree with you. But the thing of it is, and that was something I said towards the end of my race, and that stop pretending to be something you're not. Just be true to yourself. If you want to be a Republican, you talk like a pro Republican, you vote like a Republican, you be with a pro Republican, the Republicans endorse you, then just make the transition and go to the Republican Party. But to stronghold and to keep a 35 plus Democrat district chokehold and upholding their tax dollars, it's just unheard of. But one thing I do love and enjoy about our first elected women mayor, Donna Deegan, I see how she's reinvesting in tax dollars back in the urban core district. Because I grew up on urban core, especially on Martin Luther King Parkway in the Merle Avenue, the Durkeeville district, Sherwood. I can't tell you, Dr. Melissa, the last time I've seen any type of major construction work done in our community as long as I can live until now. And it's a beautiful sight to see. Unfortunately, it's taken a little bit too long, but it's happening. And I do agree. Angie Nixon, she did fight a good fight. I supported her when she ran. I remember when she was pregnant, when she was running, with her baby girl now. So with that being said, Dr. Melissa, what message do you have for the voters out, so to speak, that was a part of this Republican Party or NPA or who just didn't bother to vote because they were just fed up and tired of the misinformation and disinformation, promises not being kept? What can you say to them or to encourage them to don't give up the fight?
Right. Well, nothing will change if you don't get out there and work to help, super candidates like yourself,
Appreciate it.
um, and to vote. And we know that the US makes it harder than any other country to do this because, of course, all of the incentive has to be on the part of the voter. And some states, including Florida, make it extra hard for people to vote. As I've said in my classes, there are some states that want people to vote, and then
Mm-hmm.
there are others that do not. And guess which one Florida falls into? So, this ridiculous business of having to re-up your voter by mail request every
Mm-hmm.
election and to check your status in terms of your address. And now this really ridiculous thing about um, does the license match one's maiden name? All of these things are just ridiculous barriers to put in the way of people. But people have to understand that, and people have to know that there are resources to help them vote, to understand the issues, to help them get registered. And of course, going to, duvaldems.org, but also, of course, going to the Supervisor of Elections website. And people, of course, I think a lot of NPAs understand this, but in case they don't, we're a closed primary state. So you have to change your registration in order to vote in a primary, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to impact the process. So again, recognize that some states are really, really good at these issues in terms of denying people their rights to vote. And this is way up there on that scale, but don't let it discourage you because we're all out there to help you. And we're all working hard to make sure that there are changes in these city councils and legislatures. I mean, we've got the best mayor we've had in a long time. And
Yes.
it's so ridiculous that, a bunch of folks on the city council are trying to make her life difficult and not uphold the policies that would help people.
I totally agree with you. Because I have went down and made some public comments, about some of the immigration bills that was proposed and passed, and even when having the protection bill when we had those three persons in Newtown that was killed, which was in my old neighborhood.
Yes,
I mean, and some of the legislation that they're passing is just, it's like it's mimicking from the state level, the federal level. And I agree with you, Dr. Melissa, that we need to keep folks involved, even though it tends to be exhaustive, frustrating, emotional, or hurting. And that is by design. They want us to get emotionally drained and to give up, but we can't.
that's
So I
right.
understand there's something you have going on in May in Duval County. What's going on in May that you invited me to?
So we're having a welcome new Democrats from districts 2, 3, and 4. And of
Okay.
course, you've got a couple precincts in 4. And
Yes.
so I'm hoping you bring some petitions that people can sign to get you on the ballot.
Of course.
Um, yeah, so there's a couple of Welcome New Democrats events. And one of them is next Saturday, I think at 5 p.m. And the next one, so Saturday the 10th, and then Monday the 12th at I think 7:30 p.m. I should just actually look at my email to make sure I'm correct about that. And both of them are at the Pablo Creek Regional Library.
Okay.
So we definitely want people from, I mean, it's pitched at, new Dems and NPAs who have recently moved into city council districts 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. That's good to know. That is a good thing to do. Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Good,
By the way,
good.
I'm gonna take a clip of this announcement and I'm gonna drop it a little early since it'll be before your podcast drops. So that way I can push it out and get it out for you. So
Sure.
who
Thank
who
you.
knows who listen to podcasts. And we would love that. But I love the fact that you are writing books and you're co-authoring, especially the one Walking the Gendered Tightrope. What is that
Yep.
book about? That's interesting.
So again, being a political science wonk, I've always been really fascinated by how the structures of governance and politics affect people's chances to be elected, but also the chances of issues to get on the official agenda and either get
Mhm.
passed or not passed. And so, what my co-author, Karen Kudrowski, and I looked at was the fact that both Theresa May, the former British Prime Minister under Brexit, And
Mm-hmm.
of course, Nancy Pelosi, record-shattering two-time
Mm-hmm.
U.S. female House Speaker.
Yes.
They both had gotten these really strong electoral successes and resounding supports, but then shortly thereafter, they had challenges to their leadership. And so people in the political parties, both the Democrats in the US House and the conservatives in the UK, because May was a conservative, started holding these votes to make them resign from leadership. And so, both of us are pretty long-term jaded political scientists. And so, we looked at basically the paradox that when parties face challenges, they want to put sort of a figurehead woman in power to show the voters that, oh, yes, we've changed and everything's different. Yay, us.
Mm-hmm.
But then when push comes to shove, and it doesn't take that long, you get men within the party deciding that, oh, they'd really, after all, be better at doing the job. And they should mount these challenges and throw the women leaders out. So the shelf life of women leaders is often less than those of men. Although I have to say, Pelosi, she broke the mold on
Yes,
many
she did.
fronts. Yeah,
Yes, she did.
yeah.
Wow, I'm gonna have to get that book. Look, I might need to read that book since I'm running for. Need to get that book and read it because I might need to refer to some things. Okay,
Well,
so
and I could also say, just by the wayside, I have a colleague named Nadia Brown
uh-huh.
who's written a great book about women's state legislators in Maryland.
Okay.
And it applies to people actually in Florida, such as Angie Nixon, who face all sorts of hostility and barriers because we know Angie was not treated well.
No, she wasn't.
In the Florida legislature, there was hostility, there were micro and macro aggressions. And
Mhm.
so Brown looks at, how these women who are so incredibly accomplished and work so hard, and then they get to the legislature and there's all this really poor behavior against them, and it's very disappointing.
Very much so. Very much so. So, what about the other book, Understanding American Politics and Forthcoming, Gender and Intersectionality in Public Policy?
Yes. So Karen approached me to do another book.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding, what's very current in policy and social sciences research generally, which is about the question of intersectionality, i.e., how do different sorts of intersectional inequality and discrimination intersect to make women's lives and, trans men, etc., make
Mm-hmm.
their lives more difficult in formulating policy. And so, two early theorists of this were Neera Yuval Davis, who's in the UK, and of course, Kimberly Crenshaw from the US,
Mm-hmm.
looking at, and the early sorts of theories of intersectionality were about thinking of intersections of inequality like cars approaching an intersection. So you got race, you got gender, you got sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
But then as time has gone on, of course, more recent theorists such as Ange Marie Hancock and some others have looked at how do these axes actually intersect and how do they affect each other. So, is a Black female military veteran, is she in the same position as a white female military veteran? Is a lesbian military, serving in the military the same as, a heterosexual woman? So we really have to combine these notions of inequality and how they intersect, sorry, to affect the framework within which we all operate.
That's good to know, which leads me to my next two questions because I'm working on my dissertation
I know you
of,
are.
about efficacy. It's equity, teacher efficacy, and CRT in a Florida school district, and it's a
Uh,
qualitative study of the political realities that our teachers are dealing with these two legislative laws in Florida. Stop woke act and don't say gay.
uh,
And then the other gamut with the censorship of Black history, LGBTQ, gender studies, and some indigenous studies that I just learned about that has been intertwined because they try to hide a lot of this stuff, but as I've been doing my study and unraveling a lot of the pieces is exposed. So speaking from educator to educator, Dr. Melissa, I was really wanted Dr. Jill Biden to really speak out on behalf of the educator to galvanize every educator in the United States when they start attacking them because she is in the classroom herself. And I don't understand why. Maybe it was contractual issues that she couldn't or whatever. How can we get the dignity, the respect, the position of the teacher back on the forefront?
It's very hard because, frankly, the momentum has really gone
Mm-hmm.
towards, blame the teacher for everything that happens to our kids, whether they have any impact on it or not. And,
Right.
the state of Florida, and I'm not sure how unique Florida is in this case, but it's something that I've learned about fairly recently, which is, of course, how Florida funds people to teach at home, homeschooling, and then
Mm-hmm.
they fund charter schools, which are, of course, going to include religious schools. And
Mm-hmm.
there's, I think, very little quality control there. While the official statements are, oh no, we follow a curriculum and all that, how is it going to impact religious schools that say women can never be equal to men and women should stay at home and have babies? I mean, that's just not the case. So, unfortunately, to appease the, uh, I guess we would say the lowest common denominator of voters in the Republican coalition, and of course, helped by some Democrats, um,
Right.
we've seen just things go really awry, and the independence of teachers and the public trust in teachers is doing the best that they can possibly do. It's
Right.
it's gone out the window, and it's the same issue with fighting on other policy fronts. We just have to keep calling it out and fighting.
Is
Um,
exactly because I think to me my dissertation is that form of protest, to be
yes,
honest,
and
is
the book
to
that'll come from it.
oh yes, because that is I'm doing them both in tandem.
Oh, good.
And it's I kind of twist the topic a little bit for the book for my dissertation because I wanted this attention grabber. But the thing of it is, these people that are in power, men and women, who are attacking educators. They
Yeah,
had educators to teach them to become where they are. And that's what was confusing and so baffling to me. You want to disrespect the teachers who taught you to get you where you are. And now you want to strip those privileges from your next generation. You don't want them to have a worldview. You don't want them to learn about other cultures. You just want to control what the teachers say, what they do, how they teach it. There's no autonomy at all. And it's like teachers are self-censoring themselves so much. And that is some mechanisms and guardrails that I'm putting in place because I know some teachers are going to be very skeptical about speaking out about these two laws.
sure.
But what I do know and what I do love about you is the books that you're writing. And I would love for you to send me the covers because I would like to promote them with this podcast because I think
Sure.
they're very informative. And even candidates that's running for office, they can learn a lot from these books, especially from Representative Angie Nixon's experience. Because when she told the story about they locked her in a dungeon down there where the rats was, Dr. Melissa, in the Florida Capitol, my heart just dropped
Of course.
because she spoke out and she was fighting for her constituents, her voters. And I had a brief conversation with a former representative that told me they had this protocol where either you fall in line or you lose your privileges as a
Right.
representative. For you, what do you look for in a candidate that's running for office? What would be a quality candidate for you right now in this season, in this culture?
Well, certainly the attributes that both you and Rachel Grage have. Um, so we look at, of course, both knowledge of, the political system and commitment to issues. And again, you and Rachel both shine on those measures. And frankly, I'm not so sure what attributes were persuasive to the voters who elected, the person you're running against. It's very hard to sort of understand what issues persuaded people, but clearly we look to the notion of what somebody can bring to the table. How is their experience new and different for the legislature? How are they not sort of more the same brand of soap that we've always been buying or something?
I love that comparison.
Yeah.
The same brand of soap. I got to
Yeah.
use that one, Dr.
Feel free.
I love that. I love that. I'm to be honest, for decades, I wanted to run 10 years, about almost 15 years ago now, for city council when all the women were running here. That
Yes,
might have been before you came to the area
it
where
was. Yeah.
it was like 9 or 10 women, they sought after running for city council seats. And at the time, my spouse wasn't ready yet. And out of respect for him, I paused and I waited. But I let him know that had always been a passion or desire of mine to run because I had saw so much, not just being an African American young woman growing up in an urban neighborhood, the challenges I faced in the public school systems where Black and brown students was only taught basic level writing. They were never introduced to scholarship writing until
Ugh,
we get into college. And then when we get in college, then we're not able to pass because we're not writing at the scholarly level. I went through that when I started my doctoral program here locally, and it was just a nightmare. And I was dealing with some health issues at the same time, which
right.
was impacting my cognition. But now that I found a space and a place online for me to be able to thrive to do that, I have that story and that journey to share to encourage those. Just because we didn't get it growing up, it's not me, it doesn't mean it's not attainable.
Right.
And it's not, so I started looking at some of the personal issues that impact me and then really studying the legislation, at the local level, the federal level, when I was doing my research, for my topic, because I shifted to really focus on the students. But I say, okay, if the teachers are driven by policy to teach certain things, then we need to deal with the policies
Yes.
that dictate what the teacher can say, what she can't say, or what he can't say, and what she things of that nature. And that's what made me shift my dissertation more to the political realities to show to draw that needle how legislation policy really drives and control what your student learns when they bring that book home to you or when they have to log onto a computer site. So, Dr. Melissa, as we talked about advocacy, activism, academia across borders, I can imagine you're getting feedback from your folks and friends in Canada about what is going on in our country right now with this current administration.
Ugh.
Before we end this interview up, I'm just curious. What are your Canada neighbors and friends are saying about what's going on in the United States under this new administration?
Well, they're as disgusted as the rest of us.
Mhm.
And basically, they scratch their heads and say, how is this possible? And again, I have to remind them that, it wasn't a majority election in terms of, he didn't
Mhm.
get over 50% of the vote. I mean, he did make inroads with certain populations, but it's a big head scratcher to everybody. And now some people are exhibiting buyer's remorse, such as farmers who are getting their subsidies cut. And of
Mm.
course, some of us could have said,
We
we
told you
saw
so.
this, yeah, we saw this coming.
We told you so. Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
he tickled me on, I don't forget who was interviewing the 47th president, because I am not going to say his name. He told the reporter said, well, people say they didn't sign up for this. He told the reporter, yes, they did sign up for this.
that's the thing.
So when in a voter, since you've been teaching voter oppression, how do you
Mhm.
deal with buyer's remorse? How do you tell those voters who voted for somebody who made all these promises and went totally left?
Well, politicians always make promises. The question is, are they in a position to keep them? And of
Mhm.
course, some of these promises that he made based on I mean, we should have known what we were going to get. I mean, we had a demonstration
Yes.
effect of 4 years in office. None of this is surprising or new. It's just much more extreme. Although I think this single-handed focus on deportation and all that, I mean, that's somewhat different from the first term. But it's just, yeah, it's quite nasty and it's quite brutal. And I guess at some point, voters didn't want to believe that he really could do all this sort of stuff. But now they're finding out otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah, I got a clip yesterday from Representative Jasmine Crockett. They had took a break on the Judiciary Committee meeting saying that they just gave number 47 the authorization to deport United States citizens. Now, where are we going to be deported? One person, when I sent them this the video clip, they said, "Well, where they going to send us?" I mean, if we
Someplace
were,
nice.
it's funny until it's just stupid. And I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, you gonna just, and the reason for this, I truly believe, Dr. Melissa, is because folks that did not vote for him or align with him or supported him are the people that he wants to target and to get rid of.
right. And I mean that again, speaking of activism and education, that graduate student, that Turkish woman,
Mm-hmm.
from Tufts University, they just came and, you know, took her off the street because she wrote one article and all of a sudden she's aiding and abetting Hamas. I mean, the stretch from the action to these allegations is enormous.
Very much so. And it's just disheartening. So, Dr. Melissa, I just want to say thank you so much for your work, your transition, everything that you are doing, the scholarly work that you're writing and talking about. It needs to be more attention brought to it, to be honest. And that's why I want to get the books because I am in my research phase of my dissertation. So I haven't got to my findings. And my chair, she tickles me. She said, Teresa, we never had a student that had a dissertation study that was such in real time mode, that was so
Yeah,
prevalent.
yeah,
And because even the nomination hearings with the author of Project 2025, because I talk about it in my study, and to actually insert those hearings in my paper, to insert, all the things that we've been doing here locally and the things I'm involved with on the state level and the federal level. And my goal in my findings and recommendations is to point to literature, research, books, such as the three that you just published, to let individuals know this is what the next generation needs to be in tune with, or they need to be aware of, not to rewrite the script, because you and many others have been in this advocacy. I won't say game because it ain't no game. This advocacy chessboard, chess and checkerboard
yes.
for decades, that we don't need to rewrite the script. We just need to take the lessons learned from it and just apply the tools that we have access to it. So before we go, Dr. Melissa, and well, I know you got this amazing Welcome to New Democrats events coming up, and I know these won't be the last that you all will be
No.
hosting, because we need to be working and getting going now. What would be your call to action to the listeners and viewers, especially in Florida House District 14? That's a predominantly Democratic district in an urban, historic neighborhood and communities.
Again, democracy depends on each and every one of us. And I say this in every single class I teach, whether it be in the United States or Canada. I mean, none of us can afford to just sit back on our laurels and expect somebody else to do it. It is hard work, as we all know, especially in the horrific heat of a Florida summer. But
Yes,
democracy depends on us, and we all have to play our part.
I love that. I love that. And in my words, if you're silent, you're complicit. That means you okay with all this stuff that's going on. But if
Right.
you're not okay with it, I urge you to get involved, and Dr. Melissa is a great source, especially in our local government, because we need some legislative watchers now for our local government until we can get rid of this supermajority Republican council, because it's applying a pressure and it's hindering our mayor from really getting things done
Yes.
that community members have been wanting done for decades.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Dr. Melissa, for joining us on Voices of Florida House District 14 podcast, where we're loving thy neighborhood. So it's been a pleasure. I can't wait to get your books and dive into my other long list of books. I'm reading like a couple of them at a time. So I read a chapter here and a chapter there. But just this interview has been enlightening. I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, keeping us informed and keeping us engaged as always. And stay tuned for more to come.
Thank you, my friend. And we'll be working to get you your well-deserved seat in the Florida House.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Florida House District 14, Love Thy Neighborhood. If you felt seen, heard, or inspired, share this episode, subscribe to our podcast, and spread the word across our district and beyond. From Durkeeville to Dunn Avenue, from Edgewood, from Springfield to San Marcos, building power, one voice at a time. Don't forget to sign the petition to get me on the 2026 ballot and donate $26 today to keep this campaign for the people, powered by the people. Schedule your story session, stay connected on social media, and join our volunteer team, digitally or in person, because change starts with us, right here, right now, right on your block. Until next time, love your neighbor, lift your voice, and let's fight for the future we all deserve. Paid for by Teresa V. Wakefield Gamble, Democrat for Florida House District 14. Produced by CRPC Now Media. Powered by Concierge Resource Professional Consultants, LLC.